I'm Alex Jebailey, and I'm Alex Jebailey, and I'm Alex Jebailey for the third time. No, that's pretty funny. You know what the fuck I do?
Welcome to DreamHack Tonight, Indie Heartbeat Edition. I'm Justin Burnham.
I'm Alex Jebailey.
Today, we are covering Amnesia and how awesome it is, especially during Halloween. We have Fredrik Olsson, creative lead, and Ian Thomas, story lead with Frictional Games. And I think we also have a clip from Amnesia to give you some kind of that vibe that we're going to be bragging about and talking about here shortly. Let's run that clip.
There is a moment when you realize what the pain has made of you. It has stolen your memories.
Selim, are you there? Anyone? Hello? It's Tassie!
Don't go near it. You stupid, selfish little girl. We'll all die.
I don't know where this will take us, but it can't be any worse.
The door! Get to the door! Everyone!
I keep blacking out. It feels like I'm losing control.
Run! No! Run from me, Darcy!
You are not thinking clearly. It can't end this way.
This is only going to get worse.
Again, a phenomenal franchise, perfect timing. It'll scare the hell out of you during the Halloween time. So perfect timing on release. Let's bring in Fredrik and Ian now. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good time of year for this.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Yeah, it's my favorite time of the year, being from Salem, Massachusetts. I love the scary stuff, and you guys have not ever failed. I can tell you that. So jumping right into it, this is the third Amnesia entry, right? You know, it's been 7 years since we've last seen Amnesia, and then 10 years since Frictional actually has been this close to really hands-on in terms of developing it. Because Amnesia, the second iteration, was developed in conjunction with Chinese Room. The first one was all Frictional Games. So what brought you back to this world, right? What brought you back to say it is now time for Amnesia to come back?
Yeah, I think there was the realization that there's so much more to that world that could be kind of looked into and explored. And there's also been quite a big, like, people have been asking for it for a long time. So I think it was that together with the fact that we are now turning into a 2-project studio where we want to run 2 projects simultaneously side by side. And it was a good opportunity coming out of Soma to actually start on something that felt close to home and not have 2 completely new projects starting at the same time, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's also fair to say that when we started this, the idea was that it was going to be a shorter piece of work. I'd like to say easier, but I don't think that was ever true. But the idea was that we were going to do something that fitted into the Amnesia franchise and explored a little bit of the world. And it's one of those things, like all of these things, where once you get into it, suddenly somebody has an idea, and you go, "Oh yeah, that's a really good idea." It's not going to take us a year and a half, is it? No, it's not going to take us a year and a half, and it just kind of snowballed from that into something which really is a full entry in the series.
Well, that's good. I mean, honestly, the reviews have been fantastic. It's been phenomenally reviewed with 8s and 9s across the board. I've been following it myself. So when you wanted to kind of revisit the Amnesia world and you wanted to give the world Amnesia Rebirth, what were the focus core areas that you really wanted to make different than the others, right? It's like you wanted to hone in on new gameplay loops, new mechanics, or just make it maybe deeper and better what was already there, like focus maybe on the narrative. What were the different elements that were really a key focus in developing this game and bringing it to market over the previous ones?
Yeah, I think where we're heading as a studio is more towards trying to sort out that challenge of creating a great gameplay experience that ties very, very closely into the narrative. And I think that challenge was what we wanted to add on top of this. So you had the previous game, Soma, which had a very strong and it's very well received, mostly for the narrative. You had Amnesia, which was well received mostly for the gameplay. And now we basically wanted to slap those two things together and create something strong and unique, and also looking for a more personal story this time around compared to Soma, for example, which is more like philosophical, big questions. Yeah.
Cool. And then my question will be pretty much, you guys did mention you weren't too involved with Dark Descent, but leading up into this, what were some of your biggest horror inspirations for working on Rebirth? And are there any jump scares in any horror video game that you'll never forget, like either your first one or something that just you'll always remember? Like for me, example, Resident Evil 1, when the dog jumps out the window, will always be my number one. And I remember
you actually picked mine as well. That's
my friends over. I'd be like, here, let me get you to this part. Here, why don't you try? Right at that hallway, and they would freaking hate me for that. But any other inspirations?
Oh, I mean, I think Thomas has talked about this before. One of the biggest inspirations, bizarrely, is actually Soma. And I know it sounds kind of narcissistic, but I think when the studio set out to make Soma, it wasn't sure that we weren't sure that we could deal with a long form narrative on its own like that. We thought that it was going to take an awful lot of work to get people to accept the idea that we were going to deal with a long form narrative, and it was very experimental, Soma, because everybody was really worried until it came out as to whether that was going to work. And there's been some criticism leveled at some of the gameplay aspects and some of the sort of monster encounters, and they were something that we didn't concentrate on as much, but felt that we needed to put in because we wanted to keep people's attention fundamentally. And I think that Soma gave the studio the confidence that actually people would pay attention to long form stories, and without that, without learning that from Soma, Rebirth would be a very, very different game. I think that's fair to say, Fredrik, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, you come to speak about inspiration. This has gone like Thomas Grip, like the founder and creative director at Frictional. He's when he kicked off this project, he had like read a book, was called something like Skeletons of the Sahara or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that triggered the whole desert scene. And then I think there's not that much left.
That's very true. It was a bunch of people who had been shipwrecked on the coast of Algeria and had to make their way through the desert, and they'd ended up being enslaved and nearly dying several times. It's quite a thing. I mean, that was, I think, late 19th century, something like that. It's a heck of a thing to read. We all read it as inspiration. And the other thing that Thomas kept talking about in the early design meetings is I had a flashcard that I would hold up every so often, which said, "It has been this number of hours since Thomas has mentioned Until Dawn." So we had to keep resetting that. But yeah.
Very cool. And then switching over to other inspirations with Halloween coming up, some of your personal favorite horror films over the years that you might have also been inspired to with the Amnesia series.
Oh, see, that's tricky. I really like slightly spooky horror rather than jump scare over the top horror. So things like The Awakening. Oh no, sorry. I actually mean The Others. I like The Awakening, but I actually mean The Others. The Nicole
Both
Kidman
good movies either way.
Ghost Kids one I really liked, and actually some of the M Night Shyamalan.
Shyamalan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Close. Yeah,
I
close.
just can't stop saying that. Even things like The Village, just the little tricks, the things which change your perspective. And just for pure horror, Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell, I really enjoyed.
Classic.
It was just giggling out all the way through.
Very cool. You, Fredrik?
Yeah, I'd probably go for a book if I may, and I'd say The Terror, and actually the series on HBO. I think it's on. I really like that one. It's maybe not the real like horror, but it's more of this some presence of something. Have anyone read it or seen the series? Or?
Which one is it? Terror?
Terror.
No.
Yeah, or The Terror. There's like it's like an old story from I don't know when, but the old ships that were sailing off to find new
you know
land
what?
and
Yes,
stuff.
I know what you're talking about. They have 2 seasons, and one was called The Terror with the ship
Yeah.
one, and there was another. Yeah, I actually heard phenomenal things about the TV show and the book. Yeah.
Yeah, the first series is connected to the book. I mean, the first season. So I actually didn't get into the second season, but the first one, and I loved the book. I read it first, and then yeah, I can strongly recommend that one.
Well, thanks for reminding me, because that was actually on my to-do list, and I forgot about that completely, like from a year ago. So I will be downloading that wherever I can.
Justin
for this
has
week.
amnesia.
Yeah.
It's
That
old
happens
age.
always when you talk to us. You come out of it with amnesia. So.
Yeah, it's really hard to think right now as well. Yeah, but that sort of creepy horror. The other thing, quite early on, did anybody see Jacob's Ladder way back in the day?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that sort of stuff I find much more interesting than showing blood and gore on screen. If you see what I mean, that kind of creepy stuff that's crawling in behind your eyes somewhere. That's all good.
Quick diversion, Justin. I'm so sorry. Recommendation to all of you. Just released on Shudder. It's called In Search of Darkness. It's a 4.5-hour documentary on every single 80s horror film ever.
Oh, that sounds good, actually.
Yeah, check. I started the first 2 hours. I couldn't watch it all in a row, but it goes literally every single title you've ever seen. So definitely check that out.
That sounds really good, except for the 4.5 hours part. You know, one of the, jumping back to the games, you know, you guys with Penumbra and Amnesia, you guys were there from the beginning in some of this aspect of the Let's Play boom, right? You know what I mean? You have that Let's Play, because everyone knows Let's Play is really, really successful if it's a comedy game a lot of times, or a horror game, right? You know, you guys were there right when that started to really pick up. So tracing back that evolving kind of pattern of Let's Play, how much did you kind of expect this game to be latched on to that kind of approach? Like, what did you plan in regards to that? Because I call your game Amnesia and Penumbra and all those kind of early days. You guys were right there at the beginning, the godfather of that kind of approach. So knowing that with Amnesia Rebirth, how did you plan for that, to tap into that market even more where you could?
Actually, we didn't. We actually disregarded that approach of it. I don't think when you want to make a game, or when you want to make a product, of a creative product in any way, I think it's super difficult to try and tune it from kind of based on a reception. I think it's much better to kind of go into the experience and see, okay, what type of experience do we want to create here? How do we create that through gameplay, story, environment, sound, all of that? And then if it becomes a YouTube phenomenon again, that's fine, of course. It's something, but it's not something that we have been aiming for, honestly, at all. And it seems to go down well with all of the streamers and all of that now. So we're happy about that. But it's also, I think we don't really need to focus on scaring people. I mean, that's most fun to see when a streamer gets scared, but it's also about other emotions. And I think we've tried with Rebirth to tap into other emotions than like more tragic and sad stories and stuff. So, which also kind of boils down together with the horror aspect. We tried to create a a kind of new and unique but special experience in that way. So hopefully, instead of seeing the streamers scream this time, we might see them cry. Or I mean, we're
It's a hard
happy with
balance.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard balance because, the horror is very big in the Let's Play movement and YouTube movement especially, but then you guys have such a powerful focus on narrative that you don't want to give too much away in all these streams. It's a hard balance. I could see that for sure.
Yeah, I think very much we had, I think Fredrik said earlier, we were aiming for something a bit more personal here. And I think we very much had in mind the person playing it on their own in a darkened room, sort of all their senses being tuned into this thing. And I think had we designed it specifically to feed YouTube, if that makes sense, or Twitch,
Right.
just to, I think it's a very different type of horror. I think it's more of a carnival ride, if that makes sense. And that's fun, and there are great games like that out there, but that's really not what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you played half an hour or an hour into the game, there is a build-up, there is a setting up of the narrative. Through if we'd gone for the more direct and jump scary horror, we would be in that already in the first half an hour. But that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to set the player up for something that's a bit deeper than the isolated and short-term jump scares,
and also I think there's knowing that we can't the success of the Dark Descent was a bit of a fluke. It was the right place, the right time, the right kind of game, and the right innovations. And the idea that we should try and make a game which surpassed that. That would be really difficult. And so we didn't try, actually. We just tried to make something that was its own thing, that carried on the story, had the same setting, had the same kind of feel, and people who would play it would find it was familiar.
Right.
But we weren't trying to one-up it, because that's like the sequel film, right? The sequel film is never as good as rarely as good as the first one.
Back to the Future too.
Yeah.
So that kind of actually helps me change my next question. I was going to ask about, from a developer standpoint or behind the scenes, when you work in horror games, right? This is, you're saying, is more psychological. Do you ever have nightmares of the game you're working on, or do you ever try to scare each other to the staff, or are you at a point where it's just numb and you're just focus on the product at hand and do the best we can and not think about that stuff so I don't go crazy?
Fredrik scares us on a daily basis. There are 300 bugs left to do, guys.
That's the horror we're facing as devs.
But I mean, you do a lot of research and you learn some really, really creepy things, and some of those things stick with you. But in terms of the horror of the game itself, because you're behind the scenes, you're kind of connecting everything up, you're hammering the scenery together, that kind of thing. You know what's behind the scenes, and you very quickly don't get surprised, don't get scared. And actually, it's quite difficult as we test this stuff to put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who's not seen this before. And half of horror comes from going into a space without knowing what to expect. And of course, we know what to expect. So I mean, we don't tend to scare each other very much. It does still happen. I mean, there's a section in the game which has a whole bunch of scares in it, and it still scares the artist who played that level because he didn't know that they were all in there, for example. So that's pretty cool. And we regularly test with the other people on the team. I mean, we all divide into groups to do the different levels, and so we all play test each levels every couple of weeks. And yeah, it's great. We get some scares and feedback, but the long lingering stuff, I think with this one, Fredrik, it's fair to say that the long lingering stuff is some of the deeper things that are going on in the story. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of interesting though, because I've played the game. I think in total I must have played it, if you count having played certain levels multiple times over and over, and trying to have the creative lead, having the broad spectra of the game or understanding of the game. I played it maybe 50 times in total, and it's you get numb, and I'm a scaredy cat. Yeah, I really am. So in the beginning I was scared, but then I got numb. But then all of a sudden we put another layer onto it, and we add some polish to it. And I remember just it must have been 2 or 3 weeks before release or something. I was in with one of the monsters, and I realized I was running, and I was kind of starting to sweat, even though I played that section so many times. And that, I think that goes down to also when you look at feedback we're getting now. Some people are saying, well, it's not that scary, whereas others are saying, I couldn't finish that section and all of that. So it becomes also a matter of what type of a person you are. And I'm, I guess it's good to be a bit scared or easily scared when you're designing these, because you can continuously kind of sense the fear and also the more like tragic emotions we bring to the game. I felt those as well in the later stages of the development. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it helps when you're not desensitized, I'm sure, as you're creating some of this stuff, for sure.
Yeah.
On that note, what's next for Frictional? I mean, obviously, with the fact that you can't go too much into that, but I mean, my point is, you've proven your horror chops, right? So it's like, does Frictional stay in the horror space? Does it try to do a little dabbling in this space over here? If it stays in the horror space, is it going to go focus on the narrative, kind of emotional narrative, horror space, or maybe go a little survival horror? Like, where do you see Frictional going in the future?
Next for Frictional is vacation.
Where can you?
No, but I think it's fair to say that you're not gonna see, most likely not gonna see horror in the next true horror in the next coming projects. I think the key for us, where we want to be, is strong narrative tied into gameplay, like I talked about earlier, what we try to do with this game. That's why I think this game is such a good step for the studio in where we're heading. So I mean, for me, I don't want to be that guy, but sometimes I feel a bit disappointed with the games I play when it comes to how they treat gameplay and narrative. So it's almost like games sometimes are just focusing on one or the other. So you are running around, you have a strong narrative, but you have all of these points and repetitive gameplay that becomes so isolated from what you as a player are actually feeling or what you want to accomplish in the game. And then these just becomes chores or something that just don't really feel at all connected to it. Something we put so much effort into with this game, like, without spoiling anything now, but I mean, we're trying to create the monsters you find have a strong foundation and connection to the narrative, the way that Tasi speaks in the game. She has to talk a lot because we want to connect the player to Tasi, because the whole narrative and the experience is so personal. If we don't manage to connect to Tasi through her voice and all of that, she doesn't speak too much, I hope, but still more than maybe in other first-person horror games. But all of those things just need to tie together for it to become, for me at least, a really good game. Because games are not, this is what you are occupied with while you are experiencing the story. They need to just tie together for me.
No, I agree.
And that's where we're heading as a studio as well. So now we have one project that's been in pre-production. It's going to start production now after Rebirth, and then we're going to start a new project in pre-production at the same time. So we're going to have always one project in production, one in pre-production, and then both of those have a very strong focus on the narrative and gameplay, how that can live in symbiosis.
No, I agree. It's the balance. I mean, and without mentioning any games and stuff like that, it's the a lot of people forget that balance when they're creating this product. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you look at some of the classics, even like Silent Hill 2, you know what I mean? The balance of some of this stuff in regards to how it's portrayed emotionally through the gameplay, through the actual core mechanics. It's definitely a pie chart, and you have to try to distribute it as evenly as possible. So moving on to the last question of the day, it's the obligatory question for any horror developer, right? And psychological horror developer, what doesn't matter, 'tis the season. What are your Halloween plans? Whoever can answer that first, feel free. But you got to ask that question. You got to end with that one.
Wow, it's the wrong year for that question, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't expect you trick or treating, but yes. What do you plan on doing that's somewhat festive?
I'm going to have to be kind of guided here by Fredrik because I've just moved to Sweden and I have no idea what the Swedes do for Halloween, and I'm looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, who was it that said now that there shouldn't be any? Is it the Swedish government that said that we shouldn't do any trick or treating because they call it trick or virus or something like that?
Incubating.
Yeah, no, actually, so for me, it's gonna be like just spending with the family time, and then watching Rebirth streams on Twitch. Super boring, but it's gonna be just kind of winding down is my.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have had much time to stop and think for the past while. So yeah,
That's
sorry.
awesome, guys. Yeah, no,
It's
no
a
worries.
boring response.
Enjoy, but thank you so much, Ian and Fredrik from Amnesia Rebirth, just released on PC and PS4. Definitely check it out. Again, perfect timing. We're glad you guys were able to release it before Halloween. And up next will be DreamHack Plays. I'd like to thank every one of our viewers at home. Please comment, like, and subscribe for more amazing interviews like this one, and find us on all our social medias on DreamHack.
And thanks to our sponsors, Simply Nook, Astro, Blue Microphones. We appreciate all you do for us. And guys, Frictional, Fredrik, Ian, thank you for coming. You guys are fantastic. I look forward to what you got next.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yep. Take care.
Be safe.
Thanks.